one of the nicest humans, the most incredible, the kindest, the most thoughtful, considerate, kind, loving, amazing, touching, and memorable humans of my entire life that I've ever met was in Montenegro. My brother and I arrived in Montenegro. We had a friend, Montenegrin friend that we'd met in the US. He had invited us to visit his home. We happened to be traveling in the area. We hopped over to Montenegro. We landed. We were told we would be met by his father in the airport. Or was it his sister? I don't remember who was supposed to meet us in the airport. The gist of it is, we had no idea what to expect. Landed in this country looking for somebody who would be expecting us. This is a tiny little airport. And we walk out of the gate area, past security, into the main lobby, and immediately we knew exactly who we were supposed to be looking for. Absolutely beautiful. Oh God, it's so cold. In the area of the airport where you see the people waiting with signs, there was a grizzled, if there ever was a meaning for that word, it was him. It was a grizzled old man holding two little miniature American flags, smiling with his biggest smile and waving them. So we approached him with big smiles on our face that were more than reciprocated and said hello. And as it turns out, this was our friend's father, who spoke not a single word of English, and we spoke not a single word of Montenegrin. And so there we stood, smiling at each other, the biggest smiles you've seen, with two American flags being waved and two American boys smiling, not knowing what to say. So we followed him. We get back to his car, this little old 1900s European BMW falling apart, but still working kind of car. We get in and suddenly we're off. And we are driving, having just landed in a country we'd never been to, thousands of miles away from anyone we knew, with someone who didn't speak our language, and we didn't speak any of their language. Now, thankfully, we only drove so far before we stopped and picked up a smiling young woman who happened to speak 8 languages, who was the sister or niece or whoever the relation was that we actually had been looking for at the airport. Turns out plans had changed, but we hadn't heard about it. Now we actually have a translator between ourselves and the smiling double American flag grizzled old man who was the sweetest man in the world. So we begin to speak. After the next couple of days of being in Montenegro, staying in this person's house, we began to realize how much you can communicate without actually even speaking someone's language. So we lived in the house with this old man and his wife, neither of which spoke English. And again, we still weren't speaking very much Montenegrin. We were learning some basic words, but nothing really useful. And yet, day in, day out, we were able to communicate and come to love these two people, even without being able to speak with them, just by the kindness, the unending kindness that they showed towards us and everything that we tried to reciprocate in the least that we could in being guests in their home. As the days went by, Rocky, the old man with the 2 flags, as everyone called him, Rocky would volunteer to drive us places. He would take us places that he loved in his country just to show us. He couldn't speak to us, but he just wanted to be there. He wanted to be there to see our faces as we reacted to the parts of his country that he loved. Then, in the evenings, we would come home. On the days we weren't with him, we'd come home late at night, and we'd find Rocky in the living room with a piece of paper and a pen and an entire page of Montenegrin to English phrases. Now, he didn't speak any English, so he would literally copy verbatim what the dictionary would say in response to a translation to a phrase he understood in Montenegrin. And he would have a full page of phrases that he wanted to use with us that evening. So every night we would come home to a new page, to the warmest household, giving everything that it possibly could, even though it barely had doors that locked. It had the smallest and oldest refrigerator you've ever seen, with no freezer, and 2 bedrooms, one of which they gave up for my brother and I to stay in. The whole trip went by in this way, where the kindness was never ending. We were moved every single day by the way that they went out of their way to treat us with kindness, having never met us before. We were just friends of their son in America, and he had simply said, "My friends are coming to visit. Take care of them." And yet here they were, going to great lengths to show us that they cared. Finally, the end of our trip comes around, and by this time we've met a few other people in their family, and so they all take us to the airport, the same airport that not too long ago we had met Rocky with his 2 American flags. And it comes time to say goodbye for us to finally go through security. We start going around giving hugs, shaking hands, saying goodbye. Suddenly Rocky turns and leaves. And Joe, my brother, and I are standing there, confused, wondering what's going on, also wondering how long we can wait before we actually have to go through our gates. So the daughter chases after him, talks to him. Turns out Rocky said saying goodbye to us was bringing him to tears. That saying goodbye to the 2 American boys that he showed around his country, and that he spent days communicating with just smiles, gestures, and terribly pronounced Montenegrin, were memories that he was never going to forget. And he was actually crying. And he said that he did not want us to see him cry. He could not have that be the last way that we saw him. So Rocky was gone. We didn't get to say goodbye to Rocky because he didn't want to see us to see him cry, but we will never forget Rocky. As it turns out, a couple weeks ago, Rocky finally passed away. So the last memory we have of Rocky is him standing with his 2 American flags with the biggest smile you've ever seen on a human's face, and coming home in the evenings to his whole page of translated Montenegrin to English phrases, and him silently driving us around, showing us his beautiful country and how happy it made him to show other people the things that he loved.